Thank you for joining us. Today, we were fortunate enough to be joined by a gentleman who didn't just have a front row seat to some of the most iconic moments in basketball history, but as athletic trainer, he was also instrumental in his team's success that included 11 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls and the Los Angeles Lakers. This is our conversation with Chip Schaefer.
Just love me. Just love me.
From Chicago?
Sounds good.
I'm from southwestern Michigan,
okay.
right on Lake Michigan, down by the Indiana border.
Okay.
So
All he does is
I used
talk
to see
about.
you all the time on WGN.
Oh,
they're
sure.
interviewing in between, in the
Yeah.
halftime, and what's wrong with this guy's ankle and this
Yeah.
guy's leg.
It's interesting because in those days,
Put the microphone.
in those days, they weren't as concerned about athletic trainers talking, and so I did, frequent interviews, oftentimes daily, with health updates on people, and these days, I think it's probably the gambling thing that has people concerned that information, so it's very filtered, very structured.
Oh, yes,
they really
yes.
got to be aware
Yeah.
of that. So no more casual conversations.
Right.
They don't want athletic trainers just going rogue and just starting to talk about health
That's
status.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Because gambling is huge.
My assumption is that's why they've controlled it. I mean, it makes sense.
I didn't
Yeah.
think about that. That's amazing. But the funny thing is, people have to realize that I've known you probably, almost 40 years.
It is close to 40. And for people that don't know, give the background, but it was, when I was the head athletic trainer at Loyola Marymount, and we would host Pete Newell's Big Man Camp, and obviously you were a big part of that. And it's funny, I was just thinking about that the other day, and what is there anything even like that anymore? I mean, that
No.
there was a status associated with it. I mean, I was even trying to recall some of the players. I remember, one of the years, I guess it would have been '89, that Sean Kemp was just an incoming rookie and was an attendee to the camp. It's just so raw, and I remember just that type of athleticism is something to behold.
Well, it's a funny thing. I think probably about 6 or 7 guys became Hall of Famers who came to that camp. Loyola Marymount is where we started because Pete Newell had some kind of relationship with Loyola Marymount because they have his picture there and everything.
Is he an alumnus? I think he might
maybe alumnus or whatever. But we came there and you did a good job. But the thing is, we had that year you're talking about. I think it was Cliff Robinson, Jerome Kersey. I think we had so many. Oh, the X-Man. I don't remember. We had so many guys that have became all-stars. Then you had people that were Hall of Famers. You had Akeem, because when Akeem came, it was the funniest thing in the world. I said, Akeem, you're my height. I'm only 6'8". Yeah. He said, well, Kermit, keep quiet, because they say I'm 7 foot.
Yeah.
But what a great athlete. And you had so many guys that came through that camp. And Pete Newell did a wonderful job. And maybe you don't know, it started with me by myself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a bench warmer for the first 2 years, 2.5 years with the Lakers. I was the 5th player picked. And usually when you're a high pick, you go to a bad team. But for some reason, I went with the Lakers. And Pete Newell was the one that drafted me. He was the general manager. And so when I got the Lakers, I sat on the bench. And after a while, I said, Pete, you got to get me off this bench. I said, what do I have to do? He says, well, Kermit, I can't do that because, it'll look bad for the coaches if I work with you, because the coaches we had was Bill Sharman and John Barnhill, who were point guards. And they didn't know how to help me. They would just roll the ball to me, do a right hook, left hook. And I said, Pete, you got to help me. And he says, I can't. But then when he retired, he says, okay, I'm going to work with you. And we would go to Loyola Marymount, just me and him, from about 7 o'clock till maybe about 9 in the old gym where the sun would come on. It would be hot in there. And he worked me for hours by myself. And then after a while, he realized he was killing me. So we got a couple of other players. I think we got Kenny Carr. Some of the Lakers came. I think Don Ford came and a few other people like that came. And then it just got to be exploded. I mean, when they had Bernard King and everybody else like they were coming. Bernard had gotten in trouble in Utah, I think. And Pete Newell said, Kermit, should we let Bernard King come to the camp? I said, Pete, if anybody can get through your camp, he's not an alcoholic anymore. I mean, because it was a nightmare because there was only a few guys. And so the drills were very, very hard. So when we came to you guys did a great job for us. You helped us tremendously. And were you there the year we were filming too?
Yeah, I don't recall that specifically. It could have been. I was there 87 to 90, and then 1990 I left and went
Were
to the
you
Bulls.
were you there when Hank Gathers was there?
Yes, I was the head athletic trainer from 87 to 90, and was there through that tragic event.
Tell us about
spring
that. Tell us
of
about
1990.
that.
Well, I guess it probably should start even with my relationship with Hank. And so prior to being the head trainer at Loyola, I had been working. This is again the change in eras and personnel and the amount of and size of and scope of staffs in the NBA was really something. And this would be mid 1980s, and no team in the league would have had a full time strength and conditioning coach. But the head athletic trainer for the Lakers at that time was a very good friend of mine, and is to this day Gary Vitti, who was a longtime athletic trainer for the Lakers. And Gary and I went to the University of Utah together. I was an undergrad, and he was a graduate student there in athletic training. And Gary was very progressive for that time in particular. And I had just relocated to the Southern California area, and he had asked me to be, help out with the strength and conditioning for players there. And so I had done that on a part-time basis, just for a few bucks a week. And my full-time position, I worked at the Curlin Job Clinic in the physical therapy department there, and it was at that clinic that Hank Gathers, during his redshirt year, after transferring from USC, was there for patellar tendonitis or some type of a relatively unserious knee injury. And so I was his treating therapist there, and became really close to him. And I remember him coming in really excited one day, late spring, early summer of that year of 1987. And hey, the head trainer job is open. You need to go apply for that, which I did, and got that job. And so, got that position summer of 1987. And the very next year was his first year. He and Bo Kimball, the two players, Philadelphia natives, that had both gone to play for Stan Morrison. He was the coach there at that time,
Yes,
but he lost his job. It was replaced by George Raveling. And as any new coach comes in, wants to kind of get rid of some of the previous players and bring their own guys in. And so Paul Westhead, who was also a Philadelphia native, was more than happy to have them transfer over there. And I guess through some common connections from the Philadelphia area, Hank and Bo came over to the campus and loved it and loved the way that style of play. And so they agreed to transfer over there. So that 86, 87 year would have been their redshirt year, but then 87, 88 was the first year of their eligibility. And so kind of came in, and that was a whirlwind season. I think we had a 24, 25 game win streak that year, and kind of stormed into the NCAAs, shocked a Wyoming team in the first round with two NBA players. I think they had Eric Lechner and Fennis Dembo both in that team. And then the next game was against North Carolina, and we got our hat handed to us that game, and reality set in. But I think people realized how good that team was going to be. Had another good year, made the tournament the next year. And then now that fast forwards to that final 89-90 season. And there was an incident that had happened earlier in the year, around early December that year, where Hank actually kind of collapsed during a game at the free throw line. And, at first the concern was that maybe he was just dehydrated or, something of that nature. But, for tests revealed that he did have some underlying, cardiac issues. And after a period of several weeks of testing and stuff, he was, prescribed some medication, was able to help with that a little bit, and started off slow when he came back to play, but started to play better over the course of the season. A WCC conference tournament that we hosted. I think it might have been the first round game, or maybe the second game. We were playing University of Portland, and anyway, that wound up collapsing after catching a lob, and a dunk, and a couple steps going the other way on the court, and collapsed, and that's tragedy occurred at that point, and we were unable to resuscitate him, and unfortunately he expired, and that's just, again, one of the obviously the dark period in my whole career, a career that's been blessed with a lot of good things. That'll always stand out as a tremendous loss to me personally, and to basketball fans everywhere. He's a wonderful, wonderful person from a wonderful family, and a great loss to everyone, for sure.
He was one of the few players that was in college that came to Pete Neal's big man's camp. and he acted like he was a 10-year veteran
Yeah,
telling everybody
yeah.
what to do.
Yeah, it was all swagger. Trust me.
That was his personality?
Yeah. He, he had such a big personality. It was amazing. He was so funny and so clever and so smart, and he had this wonderful gift of mimicry. And he would go into these back and forth. He could do a Howard Cosell, Muhammad Ali interview, and he would imitate people, and he would just. There was one year where we had our postseason banquet, and the person who was supposed to host it, for some reason, one of the LA area, I think, sportscasters had maybe a family thing or something, and had to cancel at the last minute. So Hank, one of the players, literally emceed this year-end award ceremony, and he just killed the room. I think he could have played Vegas or something. He was just had everybody in stitches, and just really a memorable night.
That was his personality. I mean, T.O., you don't realize, but he was around a lot of pros, but he was almost telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and but he was a great player. Now, were you on the team? Were you trainer when they played LSU, Shaq and them?
Yeah. So that was an interesting week. They had to fit that. It was a national TV game, obviously, and they had to fit that game in the regular season. So we had to modify the conference schedule that year and wound up, it was kind of an NBA style, 3 games and 4-night thing, but we traveled to Baton Rouge, and they were stacked. So they had Shaquille and the other big kid, Stanley Roberts. For some reason, I can remember the whole team, and then obviously
Chris Jackson.
Chris Jackson, at that time, and then a couple of other really terrific players. They had a kid named Vernell Singleton, I think, and another kid named Sims. Just huge and athletic, and don't check me on this, but I think the final score was something like 148-144. We lost the game, but
I watched it.
It was an amazing back and forth, and ironically later in my career, I would work extensively with Shaquille, and I went to the Lakers, and he had nothing but the best and kindest words to say about that game and about dueling with Hank, who was probably just half his size, but just played with so much heart and determination and just a will to compete.
No, he was.
Yeah,
it was just incredible in the thing. Watching him play, and
led the nation in scoring and rebounding. You made an earlier reference to Xavier McDaniel. I think that he was maybe one of the first players to do that, or the last player until Hank. And there was that one season, might have been 88-89, where Hank did lead the nation in scoring and rebounding, which is quite a feat.
And I think the other kid that played for Knicks did it too. I think
Kurt Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those guys. I mean, that's incredible that they, that he was that good. He would have been a first-round draft pick for sure.
Yeah.
And there's no question. And his personality reminds me a lot of Terry Cummings. Terry Cummings was like the same kind of personality. Did you ever know Terry Cummings?
Not personally. I never had him on any of the teams that I worked with. But it's funny that you say that, because they even, if you looked at pictures of them, they even kind of favor each other a little bit through the face and everything. And so it was kind of, and their games were a little bit similar. And so that's kind of an ironic twist.
It's a shame, but UNLV had a tremendous run in the NCAA tournament after that unfortunate incidents.
Yeah.
And you guys lost. I don't know who you lost to.
Well, that last year, it's ironic that I'm working at UNLV now, because, and it's funny because I was just at a game, one of our first games the other night at UNLV, and even though I've been in Thomas and Mack a million times over the last 30 plus years for summer leagues and exhibition games with the teams I've worked with, it was the first time I'd been in the building for a UNLV college game since, and this has been 35 years, but during the 89-90 season, we bookended our season against UNLV. We opened the season against them right around this time, mid-November. It was a preseason NIT tournament. And it was interesting, the game, we again, don't quote me on this, but I think we were up maybe 39-25, something like that. We just jumped out on them, and the game was suspended for about 20 or 30 minutes for a bomb scare. And of course, the conspiracy theorists among us have always kind of think that maybe Tark signaled somebody so that his guys could catch a breath. But that was in November, and then we played them at the end of the season in Oakland for a chance to go to the Final 8 game. And they crushed us that game. I think we were playing just on will, following the tragedy of Hank's death, winning 2 games in Long Beach the first weekend. And then we beat an incredibly talented Alabama team the game before that to go to this chance to go to the Final Four, and our luck kind of ran out, and they were just kind of steamrolled us with all that talent that they had on that team with Larry Johnson and Augman and Anderson Hunt, Greg Anthony. Those really good teams. So.
That was like a Cinderella team. I
Yeah.
mean, it was. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I remember it very well. So tell me, when did you leave Loyola Marymount, and is that when you went to Chicago?
Yeah, so the end of that season ended and went into the off season, and again, getting back to my good friend, this is an era, it's funny to think back, but with all the technology and cell phones and texting and the speed of light that information travels with. So this is summer of 1990, and I got word from Gary Vitti, let me know that through the NBA grapevine that Mark Feil, who was the longtime trainer for the Bulls, had left the Bulls to take the same job with the Milwaukee Bucks, the head trainer job there, opening up the position in Chicago. And so I went about applying for it, in all the kind of traditional ways back then, where there was no online process at all. You had to send in a letter. I sent an introductory letter with a resume to the right people, and again, some of the good connections, having been in with the Curlin Job Clinic and those doctors, having taken care of professional athletes, and especially the Lakers over the years, I had a lot of credibility. I mean, Bob Curlin, called Jerry Krause, the general manager, on my behalf. Coach Westhead, who ironically had coached the Bulls several years earlier after leaving the Lakers, called on my behalf. So I had a lot of people in my corner for that. And again, as in addition to the big man camp being held there, Loyola was kind of a little basketball mecca at that time, and that's where the summer league was held at that time too. And it was run by Larry Krieger. And
Larry Krieger.
Yeah, there's a name from the past, right?
Yes.
And so I was kind of the host trainer for that every summer. And because the Bulls were sending a team out there but didn't have an athletic trainer, Jerry Krause suggested, well, hey, you're already there. You're one of the finalists for the position. Why don't you just take care of the team? And at that time, typical summer league roster, they had, Stacey King and B.J. Armstrong were rookies the year before. Scott Williams, we had just acquired in that draft that year. Will Perdue, I think, was another holdover. Then it was a bunch of other, Jeff Sanders and a bunch of other players made up the summer league roster. And so I just took care of the team then, and basically kind of had an audition, met Coach Jackson, for the first time then, and got to know everybody, and took care of the team for the 10, 12 days that they were out in LA, and I guess did well enough and made enough of an impression that I was offered the job shortly
Where were
after
you
that.
guys playing into the summer league that year?
So in Gersten Pavilion was where everything was held. All the games were played there. That was for many years. Yeah.
Where is that now?
Well, it's the same gym that you had the big man camp is. It's just the small on-campus gym. All the summer league games were played in there. Yeah. And then I think later they moved it down to the Pyramid in Long Beach for a while.
Yes.
And then, obviously over the decades, there's been different summer leagues. Utah had one for a while, just one in Orlando, but whatever, maybe probably close to 20 years ago now, the whole process started out here with Warren Legary and the summer league in Vegas. And that's just become obviously a big event now.
So how did you become the official trainer for the Bulls?
Yeah, so at that time, so summer 1990, August, after finishing summer league, was offered the position then and relocated back to Chicago. I'm a native Chicagoan, so it was really a happy coincidence. And not only am I from the Chicago area, but my hometown is Deerfield, Illinois, which is a north suburban town, and that's at that time where the practice site was located, and both my parents were still alive at the time, and all my friends were back there. So it was really kind of a homecoming for me, and really a wonderful period and opportunity for me to go back home and have that job with a team that hadn't quite yet won it, but was right on the brink of winning it. So
you were at the right place at the right time, and
no doubt.
everything was perfect.
Yeah, no doubt.
And you said you had a relationship with BJ and Stacy from the summer league.
From the summer leagues and Will Perdue, and so I'd already kind of broken the ice with those guys, and then quickly met the rest of the players at that time. John Paxson, Bill Cartwright, the rest of the guys as they filtered back into town. It was interesting because in those days, and you'll remember this, I'm sure. This is the way it was for you, Kermit. The off season was really an off season. The season ended whenever it ended, and everybody, that back in those days, the trainer put a "Gone Fishing" sign on his door, and it was see you in September, and that's kind of how it was. The players, it was a lot of guys didn't even show up until like the media day before training camp. So that was probably the first time I met Michael and Scotty and those guys. Although maybe Scotty and Horace Grant used to lift weights in the facility, so maybe I saw them a week or two before that. But back in those days, it was very much of a off season was the off season, and everybody did their own thing.
Okay, let me ask you a question. When I played, we had one trainer. He had to do everything.
Yeah.
The travel, the luggage, the equipment, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
And it was just overwhelming. Oh, waking the guys up
Yeah.
on the road. I mean, making sure that all the bags are packed, the uniforms. Oh, did you have to do all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is yes. And when I came in 1990, that was kind of in the very beginning of a transition phase as staff started to grow. But I came in 1990, and so I had to do equipment. So I did the laundry and everything. And that was one of the things that Jerry Krause said to me. He said, I'll hire you an equipment guy the second year, but the first year I want you to do everything so you know how to do it, which I thought was fine. But I was very, very busy that first year, really doing, all the travel coordination. Now, the one thing that I was fortunate that I did miss out on was that 1990-91 season was the first year that the Bulls chartered the whole year. Prior to that, it was pretty exclusively commercial flights with maybe a charter on a back-to-back or something, but it was pretty much commercial flights. So that rule that you guys had during your time playing with, first flight out on a back-to-back and stuff
Yes.
like that I did get to miss out on that, but I did all the laundry and all the travel coordinating and everything too.
Explain what the first flight out, so you can explain that too.
Well, so you'd be the expert on it more than me. Like I said, I have to suffer through that, but prior to teams chartering, if you had a back-to-back game, and you had maybe you played one night in Cleveland and you were scheduled to play the next night in Boston, whatever the first flight to Boston was that morning, it was a 6:30 flight, a 7 a.m. flight, and that's when the team was required by the league rules to be out, and so there's a lot of sleepyhead guys in the airports trudging through through the terminals.
I would tell the guys. I was the captain of the team, almost two of the teams. I said, pack your bags before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
But the game would be over, like we get out at 10.
Right.
We might try to find something to eat till 11 or something.
Yeah.
The first flight might be at 6. So I said, guys, make sure you pack before you go to sleep.
Right.
They ain't packed for that.
Right. A lot of frantic door knocking at 5 in the morning.
Well, no,
sure.
they would. You know what? I hate to tell you, they would leave.
Yeah.
They said, if you're not down, you're gonna leave. And on top of that, you had to pay for the next flight.
Right, your own flight out of your pocket,
out your own pocket,
and maybe fine too to boot on top of that. Yeah.
The fines were big back then.
Yeah.
And they only gave us maybe about $25 or $30 a day to eat back then.
Yeah.
And after the games, usually there's no place to eat. I mean, it was just, it was just ridiculous. They didn't have breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the kids. Now they do. Oh, it's ridiculous.
You can't believe what we do for the players now. It's crazy. And I think in many ways that it kind of retards their development a little bit when you hold their hand too much. It's not unlike parenting. If you hold your kids' hands and help them with every homework assignment, how are they ever going to learn to be autonomous and stuff? And so there's a bit of a, you try to thread a needle these days with still trying to teach them how to be men, but at the same time you provide so much for them now.
I would tell you something. I'd tell you something funny. We had to wash our own uniforms. Yeah. So after the game, we would go to my room, wash it when you're taking a shower, whatever you're doing, and hope that it's dry. But a lot of players didn't wash their jersey. Elvin Hayes, I played him one time. I said, Elvin, you stink. Yeah. I said, because he was traveling, he didn't wash it. Right. You could smell that like ammonia stench or whatever. I said, God, you smell, brother. I said, I know why you don't, because you don't wash your uniforms after. Yeah. And we used to have to wash our own uniforms, everything, wash it. And don't forget your stuff. I remember one time Gail Gertwich forgot his jersey, but he didn't pack it. He had to put somebody else's jersey on. I mean, it was comical. Or somebody forget their shoes. Did that ever happen?
Yeah. So one of the time that I came in was kind of a period of a lot of transition, where the players were still, required to take on a lot of responsibility and developed a lot of autonomy. And the more we did for them, so they were responsible for traveling their own shoes that first year. But the next year, when I was able to hire a full-time equipment guy, he would start packing extra shoes. If you've ever seen an NBA team, we teams now require an entire luggage truck. And when you get into a city and you're sorting hundreds of pieces of luggage now, that's all this extra equipment, extra uniforms, extra jerseys, and of course teams now have, more than just two uniforms, traditional home and away. Now there's a city edition, and there's another, so
It's like
you may have
7 of
4 or
them.
5, right? And so there's just so much more equipment to travel now. It's just, and so the equipment guys have assistants, and the assistants have interns, and it's just amazing how large staffs have become right now. So
Okay, let me be honest with this. Did you enjoy that? I mean, I know you liked the team, but was it overwhelming with the responsibilities that you had?
in many ways, I prefer the first year that I was with the Bulls, our entire travel party was 20 people. It was, so you had 12 players, Phil plus 3 assistants. That's 16. I was 17. Our media guy Tim Hallam 18. And then we actually did, the Bulls did a TV radio simulcast. So it was Johnny Kerr, Bulls legend, and Jim Durham, the late Jim Durham, great broadcaster. And so that was 20. And so all 20 of us could fit on one bus. All of our luggage, even for a 2-week West Coast trip, would fit under one bus. And it was in many ways bliss, to answer your question. Even though I had a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, I was also able to be the resource for everyone, and I knew everything, so I didn't have to ask anybody else anything. I was the person that had all the information, and I preferred that, actually. And though it was an exhausting year in many ways, it was in many ways it was my most favorite year of my career, was that first year, when it was just because there was a level of intimacy with 20 people only, and now just again, so 20 on the plane and on the charter and on the buses at that time. Now it's 3 times that. A typical NBA travel party is going to be close to 60, and that's just, now it's 3 buses and a luggage truck, and it just you lose something with that. You lose some of that connectivity, I think, that you have, that a good team has, and part of the joy of a team.
And you get to be the go-to guy, basically, huh?
You are, for sure, and you were the resource for everything. You knew. If someone wanted to know, what time are we is the bus going to leave? What hotel are we staying at? What's the schedule? Are we going to practice? You're the one that knew all that information. So I was communicating that directly with Phil or the airlines or the bus charter companies. And so I was the resource for all of that. And I liked that myself. I didn't like having to rely on anybody else for
Were you in
information.
charge? Well, remember Dale Tanner? Do you remember? He was before your time. He was a Laker, and he was in charge of the per diem too, and all that. What kind of were you in charge of that?
Yes, I was, and in fact, I would get a check at the start of every month that would be an amount of the cumulative total per diem for the entire team for that month. So it might be $23,540. So I would have to calculate how much per trip. I would contact the bank that I would go collect the money from. So I would say, well, I need $5,000 in hundreds. I need $4,000 and X number of dollars in ones, because sometimes the denomination would be, for a trip, your per diem might be $437 the way, because they break it down by meal, by
How much was
for
it then?
breakfast.
How much was it per day? For them?
I feel like don't quote me, but I think that first year was probably around $50 or so, and which that's 35 years ago. You could do okay with that, but it's about what is it, about 135, 140 now, I think, and you'd be surprised how fast that goes, especially if you're in San Francisco or New York or somewhere and you want to have even any kind of a nice dinner. I mean, that'll cover an Egg McMuffin, maybe a deli sandwich for lunch and Chili's or something for dinner.
Well, the guys would never get up for breakfast, though.
Yeah.
They would never get up, so they would have enough money. But we had some guys that did certain things that were wrong, and they would run out of money.
Yeah.
But see, what I would do, I would save my money.
Yeah.
I'd have some money left over. But we had certain guys that were doing stuff they shouldn't do. Would come to, because I was the captain. Kermit, can you give me some money for? I said, where's your money?
Yeah.
It's the second day on a 7-day road trip, and all their cash is gone. Yeah. I said, oh my God, what's wrong with you? I mean, being the captain, when they made me the captain, like the Portland Trailblazers, and I was a sub-comp for the Clippers, I told the coach, I don't want to be the captain. I said, they don't listen to me.
Yeah.
The coach says to me, they don't listen to nobody. Right. So I was in charge of getting them like that. But the thing is with the per diem, when I was with the Celtics, you had to wear a uniform. I mean, a suit. Yeah. Now, if you didn't wear your suit, some of the guys didn't wear their suits. Well, they didn't get any per diem. They would get a envelope with a thing saying no money because they would be so upset. Did they have to dress?
So when I first came in, we had kind of a mild dress code. It was a shirt with a collar or something like that. But all those rules have gone out completely. I mean, there may be some teams that's a team by team thing. Dress code while travel that wouldn't be a league mandated thing. And it's interesting because I think the NHL still requires that, and so there've been many occasions over the years where we've been at a hotel on the road, and then maybe an NHL team will also be checking in, and you see all these kids step off a bus in their suit. It does have a real nice professional look to it. It would be, my bias would be that, some type of a dress code would be nice and probably project some more professionalism stuff with the league. But that's a thing between the PA and the league, and I don't think that's a hill that the league wants to die on. There's bigger fish to fry than that, I think. So.
Yeah, well, Michael always looked good, though.
Yeah, sure did. Yep.
Always looked good. Always looked good. And when Michael did everybody else do the
he'd wear a suit to every game, and he looked impeccable. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about his suits. They were kind of big, like a zoot suit.
Yeah. It was a style at the time.
Okay, now tell me about the knuckleheads that they had sometimes. So I mean, sometimes they gave the trainers such a hard time.
Yeah.
Did you have a couple of those guys?
My relationships over the years with my players have always been very good. I've been fortunate in that regard. There are some stories. The guy that I made an earlier reference to that left Chicago, and in fact, worth noting that Mark Feil just passed recently, unfortunately. So the NBA lost a family member. It was funny because just watching the Hall of Fame a month or so ago, Doug Collins told some great stories, and one of them was about Mark. But Mark, was a person with a wonderful sense of humor, and Mark was a guy that used to a big kind of practical joker, and so there's many stories over the years about kind of players reciprocating back with him on that. But I didn't engage in that kind of behavior too much myself. I always kind of kept it serious, I think, and so I think the players kind of again reciprocated that back to me. So I wasn't the butt of any jokes or anything. But there are you're right about that. There are some athletic trainers that have. Especially back when teams were flying commercial, they might find something embarrassing going through security that the security person would find their bag. And this is a family show, so I won't get into details about that, but there's some stories for sure.
Well, Dale, I'll tell you about the trainer. I told T.O. about this a long time ago. In our locker room with the Lakers, certain players had retired, and their jerseys were sitting just in the locker room.
You said it was Wilt,
Elgin Baylor
and Jerry West.
And Jerry
right?
West.
Wow.
And they were just sitting there. And basically, Stan Love. Ever remember Stan Love? Well, his son.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he went in there and gave Dell $50 a piece for the jerseys.
Wow.
And those were game worn, Wilt and everything else like that. And
no one would have even known then what that kind of sports memorabilia
right.
we didn't even have
we
there wasn't
did not
even a market
know.
for it.
We did not.
Yeah.
I tell T.O. I had everything, and I used it for my charity and stuff like that. But you were exposed to. I listen. I would have worked for you guys for free with Michael. Tell you got there. Had they won a championship yet?
So the first year that I was there, which was the 90-91 season, was the first of the 6 championships. So I was again. A lot of luck, and the timing for my career was certainly blessed. But beat the Lakers in 91, Portland 92, Phoenix 93. Then
it's like you're the good luck charm.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but maybe they were my good luck charm. And then of course Seattle in 96, and then back to back with the Jazz in 97 and 98.
Do you know what though? I tell T.O. all the time. If we had known. I don't care what job I would have had. I would have said, I'll work for free for Chicago Bulls. Yeah. And Jordan, what do you want, Michael? Do you have anything? I'll go get you whatever you want. Just give me a jersey once a year, signed or game worn, because you didn't know that. But Jordan gave me shoes. He gave me so many things. Mm-hmm. And I tell a funny story about Jordan. I knew him because David Falk was my attorney. Mm-hmm. And so I had met him, and I told Hasim Rahman, the guy I work out with, ex-heavyweight champion of the world. And most people don't just I'm not in awe of them. Michael, I was in awe of because one time we went into the locker room. I don't know, I was working for the union or something. I don't know where it was. He says, Kermit, come here, I want to talk to you. I said, "You want to talk to me?"
Yeah.
And he was talking about, the pro, the David Falk and all
Yeah,
the
pro
different
surf,
stuff.
yeah.
Oh, I just said, man, I mean, for me, it's just his presence. That's why I don't see anybody, and I played with 12 Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Nobody comes close to the image he had, the aura he had, it was just unbelievable. And talking to T.O., T.O. probably fainted. It didn't matter. One time you guys were playing, you don't remember, in Portland, I took my son out of practice early, and out of school early. I say he's like in the fourth grade. I said, "Come on, we're gonna go see Chicago practice. We're gonna shoot around in the morning." So I take him out of school. I said, "We're gonna go see Chicago," and I knew Phil because I played against Phil all the time, and Phil was a good player, And Phil, I don't know what team it was he was on. He didn't like a certain player. So he said, "Kermit, check him like this. Don't let him catch the ball." He says, "I don't know who it was. I don't remember. I think it was on New Jersey then."
Yeah.
And
That's where he ended his career there.
Yeah, and he says, "Kermit, check him like this. Don't let him do this." Okay. So I said, "Phil," and then I called him and said, "Phil, can I come in and bring my son in to see you guys practice?" He said, "Oh, yeah, fine. No problem." So I'm the only one in there with my son. And the Chicago Bulls come in, and you probably were on the team then. Yeah, you were, because it was, I think it was 92.
Okay. Yeah, the year we played them in the finals.
I think it was the same year of that when the Olympic thing came up there.
Yeah.
And my son just couldn't believe it. So after the thing, Michael came over. He said, "Kermit, how you doing?" I said, "I want you to meet my son." My son couldn't talk. He couldn't open his mouth. He kept saying, "How you doing, Trey?" His eyes just open like this. And then he signed Trey's jacket. And my son is 40-some years old, still has that jacket, has not. Then Scottie Pippen came over, and then other guys came over. Because Scottie came to Pete and those big man's camp too. But he did that. That was at Stanford University when he came. And he, right away, I knew he had talent.
Yeah.
He had talent right away when he came. And when he went there, though, and that camp was tremendous for small forwards that year. You had X-Man, you had Cliff Robinson, you had Pippen, you had Dale Ellis. Just unbelievable, and they would compete.
Yeah.
And Bernard King was there. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And that was just a small forward.
Right.
And I knew Pippen, but he was always quiet. He was very quiet.
Yeah, I think he kind of grew his personality over the years, but you remember, just his background coming back from a small town in Arkansas, coming into the league, and I think, the exposure that he got, especially after the 92 Olympics and stuff, I think he kind of grew in stature and became more and more comfortable doing media things. Stuff
Were you
like
there
that.
during his rookie year?
No, his rookie year was 87, 88. He and Horace came in together, yeah. So but when I got there, he was in year 3.
So tell me this: what would in practice we read and we see on The Last Dance that Michael practiced hard every day.
Everything hard, every drill, everything. That's something that's really changed over the years. But there was nothing that he didn't bring 100% laser focus and elevated everyone else as well. Every shooting drill became competitive, and it's no secret what his success and the success that the team had really emanated from that, because the second he stepped on the floor, he was all business, and that was every day. He didn't take days off. So it was something that you really just don't see these days at all.
Yeah.
Were you ever concerned from your standpoint of them overdoing it?
Again, almost getting back to my comment earlier about off seasons being off seasons, and the league just really agonizes now. I mean, look at right now in the NBA, how many big stature star players aren't playing right now due to injuries. And I've served for many years on the NBA's sports science committee, and we would just try to look at all the data that we collect and try to find answers to these causes of why so many players are missing games to injury during the regular season now. And there's a number of theories that have been kind of thrown out, but one of them is I think I'm almost inclined to think sometimes that some players anyway, and even organizations, themselves tend to maybe overdo summers a little bit now, to where, you'll see guys post their workouts in June and July and August on social media, how hard they're working, in a gym in a full lather. And so their bodies are never really recovering, where back in those days, a couple things. One, first of all, when, Michael through his youth, I think, like most of us back in the 60s and 70s, went from one sport to another. So he's kind of putting different stresses on his body at different times of the year. So he's not just having this isolated, repetitive stresses, all year round, year after year after year, that causes a lot of these, soft tissue and bone and joint, degradations and breakdowns that you see. We see players coming in now in the pre-draft combine with all kinds of, 18, 19, 20 years old, with histories of stress fractures and things like that you just wouldn't have seen a generation or two ago, with players playing 3 and 4 years of college basketball, letting their bodies kind of mature more. Maybe they were multi-sport athletes as kids, so there wasn't all this, just playing hundreds of basketball games a year, maybe playing on blacktop surfaces outside that, tend to be really hard to play on. And so I think, one of the things that, we practiced hard, and obviously they played and competed hard, but the off season was a time to recover. And even, I think the quality, because, the league has tried to do things with even, cutting or decreasing back-to-back games. Well, if you have a back-to-back game, which I never heard anybody complain about back in those days, but it also then provides back-to-back non-game days. So now you can take those 2 non-game days, and maybe one of those can be a rest or recovery day, and then the next day can be kind of a dedicated practice day, which teams don't practice as much anymore as they used to. So now you'll find yourself maybe in a pattern of where you're playing a game every other day. So you're never really recovering entirely, but you're never really practicing, because you're not going to practice hard on the day between 2 games. And so there's kind of this vicious cycle that that teams find themselves in.
You have to have the recovery time, and that's why they say you get your legs back. But the thing is, too, what you're saying is a double-edged sword, though, because you have guys who do not work out during the summer at all. And then they come back and they try to play just like they did 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. But because you work out, you're smart, your muscles and your ligaments and tendons get stronger with exercise. Mm-hmm. And they atrophy when you don't. And is not used to that strenuous thing that you were doing 3 months ago, and that's why they get injured a lot of times. Yeah. The Achilles tendons and stuff like that. But what you're saying is correct, too. AAU got these kids playing 3 games a day now during the summer, and we never play. I love basketball. I don't want to play 3 games in one day.
Right.
They're traveling teams. They're playing 3 games in one day, and so their body is worn out, from all of that things. So with Michael and the great teams, I love watching different things. How about when he came back? Yeah. What was that like?
So it was interesting. So now we're into, I guess that would be spring of 94. And so this is at a time where, so it's maybe late February, early March. And there were a couple times before that where he would pop in, but there's this one morning I was one of the first ones in the building, and I'm sorry. So this would be this would be spring of 95 actually. So the 93, 94 season he didn't play. So spring of 95, and I had my father had just passed a couple of months before that. And so I hear a ball bouncing in the gym, and I'm one of the first ones in the building. And so I go over there and see him, and he comes over and he offers, because I hadn't seen him since my father passed, he offered me some condolences, but I could just tell there was something different about why he was in the gym that day. And later on, he did wind up practicing with the team, and there was an obvious little buzz that he might come back, and he practiced a handful of times with the team, and then he made the official announcement, and hadn't played competitively in 20, 21 months at that point. And after maybe just a practice or 2 after his announcement, I think we had 17 games left in the season at that point. I think we went like 13-4 in those games. But the first game was a game in Indiana, and a game that wound up going overtime. And I think he got up like 29 shots in that game. I think he was like 7 for 29. The game went to overtime. And this is when, back in that time, you wouldn't have worried about, load management or anything. He was, if he was in, he was in, he was going to play. And quite a bit of rust on him at that time, still after sitting and not playing basketball for that long of a period of time. No matter how great of an athlete you are, there's still a certain kind of training stimulus that playing basketball, you need to do that to be good at basketball. You can't be out, playing baseball for 20 months and then just return to the basketball court and be at the same level you were. And then I think within a week after that, we had the game in New York, and that was the double nickel, I think, as Spike Lee dubbed it, where he had 55, and not one of those was a dunk, which was interesting too. And I think we won the game on a Bill Wennington putback or something. Yeah. But that, I think it took us close to an hour just to get to the Garden that night because there was so much traffic and everything was just so crazy, and the buzz. It was like Frank Sinatra coming back or something for his comeback concert, and it was really that was kind of the game where he I think that indicated to everybody that he was really back and he was going to be able to pull this off. But obviously that season ended disappointingly with that. We beat, I think, Charlotte the first round of the playoffs that year, and then we wound up losing to Orlando, and I think we even that game, I think it was a game 6 in Chicago where they beat us, and I think we even had maybe an 8-point lead with 2 or 3 minutes to go in the game, and they wound up, closing strong and winning the game. And he took the impetus behind that disappointment of that, and kind of, I think he was in LA most of that summer filming Space Jam. And there's stories in the basketball community that that are out there, about him having a gym put up on the Warner Brothers studio, and the, being, filming all day long the movie, and then every night he'd lift weights, and then everybody in LA was kind of a status and to get, picked to play in these pickup games. And I guess, his competitive nature came back strong. And by the time, he got his legs back at the end of that summer, and then obviously the rest is history with running off 3 more championships after that. But it was really something. Once he got his legs back underneath him, it was like time didn't pass at all. So.
But what was it like when, I remember reading that the first game back against Indiana, they didn't know who he was going to play. So they was having fun in practice. They were just kidding around, and all of a sudden the coach said, I want to talk to you guys. Michael's coming back. They said everybody got so serious.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, we got to go against this guy coming back. But, the thing is that's incredible that his mindset and his, it's just, we see, I played with great players, but nobody like that.
Yeah. You talked about how your son reacted to him. Obviously I've had the privilege of working with some great teams and great players over the years. And as you know, well, one of the interesting times when you are very much exposed to the general public and the general public's exposed to you is when you're on the road and you're in a hotel, because, a hotel elevator is a hotel elevator. And it's so funny, even whether it was, later with Shaquille or Kobe or Scotty or Dennis or many of the other iconic athletes that I've worked with. One of the things you talked about, your son's reaction to meeting him, you when you see like an elevator door open and Michael's on the elevator and you see somebody, get on and look at him, and our longtime equipment manager, John Ligmanowski, who actually just retired this last year, used to say it would be like people would react the way you would if you saw a ghost. What I mean? Like how do I act? Fear, terror, excitement. I don't know. I'm going through so many, but they would be speechless. And it would be quite the same when they would see Shaquille or Kobe. It was more like a celebrity of status, but with Michael it was like, should I speak? Should I not speak? Can I speak? How do I react to this person? So.
Shaq was like a wall, people would say. And when I used to have to put my hand on his back for the drills, I was like putting on a brick wall, like a monument or something. I don't know. But tell us about that relationship with Kobe. I knew Kobe's dad and Kobe, but Kobe was another different personality also.
Yeah. Kobe's personality and the way he approached basketball and his responsibilities with basketball and the whole idea of committing, to it was probably the closest I've seen to Michael. But there were some differences. I think that to me, Kobe always there's an air of seriousness to everything that he did with basketball, where Michael could kind of compartmentalize. I'm at practice for this whatever 2-hour block of time. But after that, I'm going to go play around to golf. I'm going to enjoy a cigar. I'm going to, be with my family, whatever. Where especially before he started his family, Kobe had just such a singular focus on basketball and being the very best player he could possibly be, and just being utterly dedicated. And if there was a to-do list, that had 20 items on it, he was going to do all 20 of them. He wasn't going to shortchange himself in any way. And he also, his competitive nature and his passion for competition, I think would certainly rival Michael's as well. And then later in life, when he did get married, then started a family, then a lot of that dedication then went, I'll tell you, there were only a handful of times that he ever would call me to miss like an off-season workout. And one of them was, calling me at 5 a.m. before I'd started my commute and to meet him because one of his daughters was sick, and he wanted to be the one to take her in to see the doctor. And then another similar was like the first day of school, and he wanted to be the one to take his daughter to school. So these were these sort of, just I think reflect his dedication, love obviously for his family would be the only thing that ever trumped basketball in his life. But up until that point, basketball was a singular passion in his life until he got married and started a family. The other thing about Kobe that was really interesting to me, and I think this started to become apparent in his brief retirement, and obviously the events around his passing are just epically tragic to everybody that was fortunate enough to know him or work with him, but even those that didn't, that just enjoyed him as a fan. The world lost someone special on that day. And I think that one of the things that was apparent is what the world's loss will be was what might have been, because he was, I think, he was probably in his office at 5 a.m. the next morning after his last game, starting the next chapter of his life. And you saw that with, he was so interested in everything. He was interested in music. He was interested in art. He was interested in films. I remember one time he came in the weight room one time, and I had, one of the business channels on, whether it's CNBC or one of those networks. And my policy was always that when an athlete was in training, if whatever they wanted certain music on, they could, it was their time to do that. And so I reached for the remote to turn it off. And he said, no, leave that on. And whoever the person was that was being interviewed on the program was like, it was a new CEO of PepsiCo or one of the big companies. And he knew more about the guy than the guy doing the interview. In other words, he was so engaged just even in that world of business and commerce and finance and things like that, because he just had this insatiable desire and thirst for knowledge and everything. And he really admired excellence in anything. I remember even like when, certain artists like, Justin Bieber or Lady Gaga, these people were just first kind of hitting the scene and becoming noteworthy. He was fascinated with their talent and their excellence in certain things, and he was fascinated by excellence in anything. And I think that really reflected a lot of what drove him, because if he was going to do a movie project and he wanted music for it, he wasn't going to mess with. He wanted John Williams to do the soundtrack of his short film. If he needed an animator, he was going to find excellence, birds of a feather like to flock with other excellence
like
together.
The top person in their industry.
Yeah. And he just was that way with everything, but he just admired greatness and excellence wherever it was. And again, I think we really lost something on that tragic day, because there was always what might have been. Yeah. He might have had an entire one of these people that has one life in one career, and then just pivots and has a whole nother multi-decade career in it probably would have been in the entertainment industry. He loves storytelling and all these things, and so it's all of our loss what might have been there. So.
Okay, now tell me this: what is the difference between Michael and Kobe with their relationships with their teammates?
In that regard, there's probably some similarity. But I wasn't with Kobe from his rookie year, but I think by the time that when Phil took the job in '99, he came in. So maybe by year 3 or 4, he was just. I think prior to that first couple of years, I think he was really isolated. He had a small entourage. He had a strength coach, and he had some other people, but he kind of was off to himself. And then the team that year had some younger players. Ty Lue was coming off a rookie year. A kid, John Celestin, that had come from Villanova. So he started to kind of engage these people more. He and Ty became close. Obviously we brought in Ron Harper that year. He really admired Ron and wanted to, to be able to play with Ron and kind of mimic, within the triangle offense, kind of the same, positions and opportunities that within the offense that he would see Michael get, but be able to play off of Ron. I think he admired that. He really connected with all of our coaching staff, but Tex Winter in particular. You talked a lot about Pete Newell. You talk about two people that are probably very similar and coached in the same era in college basketball. Pete and Tex Winter obviously are of that era. It's one of the wonderful things I think, and I don't know if you ever stop to think of this, Kermit, but what a small world the basketball world is, and there's sort of that, whatever that degrees of separation game, 6 degrees of separation of things. And so I think of someone like my 20-year relationship with a coach like Tex Winter. Well, Tex Winter, coached against Fog Allen. Fog Allen played for Naismith. I mean, so here's a guy. So I'm only like
history
in a weird way, like 3 or 4 steps from the guy that hangs the peach basket.
2 or 3 degrees of separation.
You know what I mean? And so I don't know, that really, I'm kind of always been touched by that. And obviously you could do that a million times over yourself as well. And it's the basketball world is a big world in many ways, but in other ways there's an intimacy to it as well, because it is small, that smaller than we all believe that it is.
Okay, my question: you were there when Doug Collins was there?
No, Doug. Well, I've gotten to know Doug really well over the years, but I never worked with Doug. Doug was I think let go by the Bulls in '89, and so the '89-'90 season was Phil's first as the head coach, and then I came summer of '90. So I know Doug, and I've gotten to know Doug and his son Chris real well over the decades. Doug and I never worked together. Although Doug was, when I went back to the Bulls in 2016, Doug was an advisor, and so we had a lot of time together and interaction over those years. So
yeah, it seemed like in that thing, Michael loved him. They got along really well.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if that's what it was portrayed as.
Yeah, so I can't speak to their relationship when Doug was coaching the team. I think that one of the things with Doug that was maybe a little bit different, and again, this gets into philosophy, and I think that maybe Doug, was more willing to feature and isolate Michael on the offense, where Phil was, kind of, whether it was his days with the Knicks or whatever, kind of favored a more egalitarian, equal opportunity approach, and that's why, over the years prior to that, where he and Tex worked together, they probably talked a lot about offensive principles and kind of this more of a team concept. And I think that really worked well because when you're, this better than me, when someone's really, really talented, like people like Michael and Kobe, they're going to get their opportunities. You could have any offense at all, and they're going to find their opportunities in that offense. They're going to get their numbers. They're going to get their shots. They're going to get their touches. But if you do have an offense that does favor ball movement and a lot of, passing and things like that people feel involved, and because they're involved, they've got skin in the game themselves, and they're going to probably engage more at both ends of the floor, and it's going to elevate everyone's effort. Whereas if you're just standing there off in the corner while some guy is just pounding the ball and isolating, possession after possession, and you don't touch the ball, you don't feel involved, and that's probably going to have you disengaged. And if you're disengaged at the offensive end, you're going to disengage at the defensive end, and that's not good. So.
Well, go ahead.
What was some of the stuff that you ran into with your position where you might be like amazed, whether it was something like dealing with someone who's, built like a superhuman like Shaq, or somebody like Kobe who, seemingly played through anything? Yeah,
it's interesting. Like, so when your comment about Shaquille, and Kermit commented earlier about just his natural strength. I mean, you're talking about a guy that really didn't need to do much in the weight room. So part of my responsibility in that, with that team, because my responsibilities have varied from team to team. I've kind of worn both hats, and sometimes one hat or the other hat, or both, between the worlds of the kind of the healthcare and medical as an athletic trainer. But I've also done a lot of work on the high performance side too. And so I've had to engage players both on the medical side and in the weight room, and with conditioning and those things as well. And, so for Shaquille, it's you're talking about a guy that could walk into the weight room cold and put, 6 plates on, over 300 pounds, and just knock out reps on a bench press. So it's harder to get someone like that because he's already, how much stronger, more powerful do you need him to be? Where again, getting back earlier with someone like Kobe, who was just utterly dedicated to doing everything right, and that probably, obviously they had reconciled to a great extent late, which is probably one of the nice things that happened. Obviously, before the tragedy of Kobe's passing, there certainly was some reconciliation with them, but that was probably certainly contributed to their difference of when you have a different philosophy about how you should conduct yourself, and Kermit's analogy of Shaquille being kind of the fun guy and the Pied Piper, and that was very much his personality. And so you got a guy that's that personality, and then you got a guy that's just all business all the time. They're gonna clash occasionally.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing that happens. I'm a big music guy, right? So the history of music is littered with bands that kind of have the same issues where personalities eventually clash, and you think, well, why could that band stay together? But why they couldn't? Because they couldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets to a point where you just can't be in the studio anymore. But so I don't know if that answered your question or not. But,
Well, were you there when I was with the NBA union? I would come in there to do our lectures that we would do to the players. I don't remember. I would always come in, and Kobe would never stay for any of the meetings, and they would find him. I don't know if they ever collected the money, but they were supposed to find him like $10,000. One time we had $200,000 for Kobe from something, and I said, Kobe, where do you want us to send the money? Your check. I don't know. It was licensing. I don't know what it was, but it was like $200,000. He says, "Oh, I just sent it to so and so." Like it meant nothing to it. Right. It meant nothing. Everybody else would be running to it. You know?
And that's guys like that. They get fined for doing something. Maybe for getting thrown out of a game for yelling at a ref or something, and their attitude is, "I'll just go do another commercial." It's like I'll just go to the money tree in the backyard and plex it. Too bad we can't all have that opportunity. But and obviously. From a business standpoint, in this era, these guys all have done really well for themselves, both on the court and off the court.
The thing too with Kobe, especially, I think, as far as people in the media and everything, that even a lot of casual fans were seemingly more impacted by it because he was like the first guy that we saw grow up from that point and become such an icon. And then all the games and the championships and the popularity and the ups and downs and everything. That there's nobody to compare him to. Yeah,
what one team only? I mean, that's how rare is that now? I mean, whether you tack, at the end of Michael's career, the time in Washington, obviously LeBron's bounced around.
Right.
So for one guy to be, with one team for that long, I mean, even Karl Malone was a Laker, that last year, as long as he, played in Utah.
Yeah.
So that's such an unusual thing now, and so I think that it just. The city of Los Angeles loved Kobe.
Oh, for sure.
Just,
and
reciprocated.
Part of it too was that it was LA. It wasn't a smaller market.
Yeah.
It was Hollywood. It was, California.
So some people wilt under the pressure. Not everybody can play in New York or LA. You know what I mean? Not everybody's built for that. And he was big enough to put that on his shoulders and was able to.
My question is, though, not a question, but what Kobe and Michael represented was hard work.
Oh, no question.
And I try to tell people, very few guys work like that in the NBA that I played with.
Yeah.
They got to practice on time, but as soon as practice is over, they're out the door. And reading about Kobe and hearing about how he would be there an hour or so before, maybe an hour after, he's worried about lifting the weights and everything else like that. We're not, being negative. What percentage of players had the work ethic, not the complete work ethic of Kobe and Michael, but would stay around and practice long after, practice the practice was over?
So some of that is again just a difference of eras. One of the things that's kind of weird now that happens is that because again back in your era of playing and in the era when I just began, teams didn't have practice facilities. They had to lease space. So that's again the Lakers practice site was Loyola Marymount. So I would go to work in the morning And I'd run into Gary when I was the head trainer there. I'd open the training room, and the Lakers were practicing on our floor. They had 10 to noon booked, but they had to be, by 11:59, the volleyball coach was staring at his watch with the team ready to kick Pat Riley off the floor. Wow. It was the same thing. I get back to Chicago, and the Bulls practice site was a health club called the Multiplex out in the suburbs of Chicago, and it was the same thing. There'd be a bunch of guys playing pickup basketball. You'd have to kick them off the floor to have a practice. Well, right around that time, early 90s, one by one, teams started building their own facilities. And with that, over the years, there's good and bad to that. So one of the things that has happened in recent years that I've seen, even just in the last few years, is that, so maybe you have a practice day called the day after you play a game, and so you go into practice, but the guys that played heavy minutes aren't necessarily, they'll sit out practice, but then they'll come back in again in the evening with their shooting coach and get shots up. So it's a sort of weird dynamic. So in terms of like how much players work, it's almost difficult to compare that era to this era, because what those guys did was practice hard during that scheduled practice time, and then they went home and they were off their legs the rest of the day. Now we have guys that show up for the practice but don't practice at the scheduled practice, but then they'll come back in after dinner. If you go back into an NBA practice facility at 7 o'clock at night, you'll see maybe half the rosters in just getting up shots with their own private coaches instead of the team's coaches. It's kind of a weird dynamic that exists now. So I think that the workout, and again, in getting back into the off season, I think players now, I could almost make a case that players now work too much during the summer and are taking too much time off during the season when they should. It's a really weird dynamic that's happened. So instead of, and so you're seeing all these guys. Here we are, not even 2 or 3 weeks into the season, and look at all the star players again that are out now, and who knows how much of that might have been impacted by the fact that they didn't give themselves enough time off. They were, working their butts off all summer, but their bodies never fully recovered or regenerated, and you get that kind of tissue remodeling and muscle remodeling and things like that happen during a rest and recovery period in the summer, and then you sort of build back up by doing your weights and your things where you're trying to build up strength and endurance at that time. And so it's just a different way of looking at it. I do think, the players now, I don't know I think that their, dedication levels are still pretty good. The players I've worked with in recent years have all still love it. But and then you could question the wisdom of this. I think players certainly these days are much less willing to play through. I'm sure you played through injuries that, looking back for what would be
about 9 years of
everything, right? And so now guys, there is some truth that it is tough to get guys to play through stuff now, because there's just the opportunities in their careers and to make life-changing generational money. And so when they look at they consult with their doctors and they get second opinions and third opinions, and so they're not going to. They don't want to risk, future earnings on things like that.
I have two questions for you. First of all, so you understood what Allen Iverson was saying when he said practice.
Yeah.
I understood, and you probably understood, but the average person, that poor kid was playing 38 minutes a game, hitting the floor every other minute. Right. He needed rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously, at that time, Larry Brown was the coach of the team, and Larry was, I'm sure, very much of a, taskmaster in my way or the highway. And because obviously someone like that kind of bounced back and forth, there's a difference between coaching college kids and coaching pro players. Right. And so it was interesting because everyone got a laugh out of that, kind of, and he did take a lot of ridicule for that comment, but he was someone that type of schedule is very commonplace now. So that he was kind of stuck between eras where teams were still, I don't care if you played 38 minutes and the game ended 9 hours ago or 10 hours ago. We have practice now, right? So by the time a game ends at 10:30 at night, and then practice is scheduled for 10 or 11 the next day, you're stepping back on the practice floor. But that's how we did it back in those days, and practiced hard all the time. And I think there was good and bad to that, because I think that type of practice schedule built up a level of resiliency, with players too, that players didn't seem to miss as much time for injuries as they often do now. So
I think in '96 you guys were like in back-to-backs. The second game you had a better record than even in the first game of back-to-backs, which was, obviously
Yeah,
indication
so
that
that,
things
is
were
that the
going
year
right.
we were 72-10?
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
It was very close.
I don't
but-
think we. I'm not even sure we even lost any back-to-back games that year. But yeah, no. So there was, a lot of that is, and again, this is something that Kermit knows firsthand. But playing effectively in a second night of a back-to-back is, 99% above the neck. It's just you have to have just a will to compete, and that's where Michael and maybe even only Kobe would rival that from the players I've worked with. Was just a will. I can't think of a better word for it than just a will to compete and will their body, no matter how tired they were, no matter if they were sick, no matter if they were injured. Just willed themselves back on the floor. I mean, Kobe willed himself to shoot free throws with a torn Achilles tendon.
Right, right.
You got to be kidding me.
That's kind of what I was alluding to earlier too. With when I remember seeing a graphic and it was showing all the injuries all over his body, that he had been dealing with at that time, and this was a couple of years before that. Yeah. But you see something like that where I think you told me that story about when you were in Washington.
Kobe.
Hey, you might have been the one taping him up. I know. I don't know.
Well, you were there. I'm sure you were there. Kobe was hurt, and you came into Washington, D.C., and people say he might not play because he was injured. Mm-hmm. He went out there and...
You said he had his ankle was
was swollen or something, and he had a tremendous game. So I walked into the locker room. I said, Kobe, I thought you weren't going to play because your ankle was hurt. He says, Kermit, I only get the chance to come here one time, and people save their money up to bring their kids to see me play. He says, if I can get out there, I'm going to play. Yeah. And Michael, I'm sure, is the same way.
Exact same way. Yeah, that was something very common with both. I tell you, there's one trait that both of them had, and that's kind of part of it. That they had an incredible sensitivity to the fact of just what you just said, that they would know that, especially if it was a road game in the other conference where it was going to be just once a year, and they felt the responsibility to that, but they felt that responsibility really 82 nights a year, but in particular, certainly in a night where you're going to be in that city one time a year. The other thing that was incredible about both of them that I think is worth talking about is their ability to give. And what I mean by that is, first, so I saw it first with Michael because I worked with the Bulls before going back to the Lakers, but before every game on the road and at home, there would be, through these charitable organizations like Make-A-Wish, there would be a Make-A-Wish kid that would their wish was to meet Michael. And so the time that would take place would be before a game in an arena. And so I would see these interactions this night after night. And one of the things that I just, and these are rough situations. I mean, these are like St. Jude's,
right.
Sad situations, often terminally ill situations with children. I mean, it doesn't get any worse, right? And it takes a certain kind of person to be able to, and strength to be able to deal with these things.
Right.
And they were both just magnificent with these kids, with the families, and making them feel at ease, making sure that these kids had a special experience. And I'm sure that there's people to this day, even decades later, that recall those interactions. And God willing, some of those hopefully those kids have are all doing fine and recovered, and that was became a very special night in their lives. But not everybody is like that, and that was one of the things that both of those guys had. That was that I would just see night after night and just kind of be blown away by their ability to do that. Literally sometimes 60, 75 minutes before tip off.
Right.
When most players would want to just be alone and their focus and whatever, and they would. Yeah. But it talks about kind of how willing they are to give back. So.
Well, that's one of the things that you had talked about too. Is that you could see stuff on TV or in the news or whatever, and you'd hear people say things criticizing like a Jordan or a Kobe about maybe people thinking that they didn't give enough or whatever. But the stuff that they did for you, that you were able to do so much stuff for so many people, and that wasn't made public.
Oh no! I think Michael, a lot of times, he did so much behind the scenes. I don't think. You don't want to let everybody see what you do because he would be inundated forever, or Kobe
it would be
forever.
Endless.
But they signed, they helped probably feed tens of thousands of people in Africa with me for what they did. I mean, for sure, because that, like I was telling Chip, the jerseys, now I look at what they were worth.
Right.
They would sign them and give them to me, the shoes, game-worn shoes and jerseys. They're going for a monstrous amounts of money. But they gave them to me. I would put them out there, and we buy, pay for the doctors that went with me to Africa and everything else like that. But, they can't do so. They can't help everybody.
Right.
But people kind of want them. Oh, you got to sign my kid's jersey. This and that. They get worn out from doing that.
Right. You could do 100 in a row, but if you say no to one person, then that person, it's probably good that it's not happening in this era of social media where people would probably try to,
they sell
make them
everything,
look bad and whatever. So
When you look back so far at, obviously your career's still going on, but when you got into your field, did you ever, as a fan, all the different iconic things that you've got to witness on top of your team success and so forth, how much has that well exceeded what your expectations were?
Yeah, no. So when I started, it's funny. I was just talking to someone the other day about kind of how I got into athletic training, and when I first got into it, I did my undergrad schooling at the University of Utah, and at that time I thought I wanted to go into kind of teaching and coaching, and you're going to kick out of this, Kermit, because you probably remember the TV show, but there was a terrific 70s TV show called The White Shadow.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that show?
I know what
Ironically,
that
about
is.
an ex-Chicago Bull who has a career-ending injury, finds himself teaching in inner city Los Angeles, I think is where the story takes place, and kind of working with kids and teaching life's lessons. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. I had very simple, goals at that time, teaching, coaching, and having a nice life. And that was, so when I was in college, I originally started down that path, but part of the curriculum for that coursework was an introductory class in athletic training, and I was just fell in love with that immediately. I said, that's for me. I had a wonderful mentor, at the University of Utah, a guy named Bill Bean, who just, again, passed just a couple of years ago, but couldn't have asked for a better mentor there. And my goals at that time was, I kind of wanted his life. I wanted to just be a head athletic trainer, maybe at a college, and have a nice home and a family and whatever. And I think, my career path took me to Loyola, which ironically, a lot of the pieces were in place there with Coach Westhead, who was an NBA guy, and working at the Curl and Job Clinic, which was, provided the healthcare for all of the pro sports teams in Los Angeles at that time. And so I kept, sometimes life, you have plans how things are going to go, but then life, there's opportunities, and so the opportunity to go back, home to my hometown of Chicago and have that kind of good fortune during that 8-year period with 6 championships and being part of that was certainly, a wonderful time. And then, the next thing I know, I relocate back to Southern California, and then a year later, Phil winds up back there. And so then the next chapter was able to be written. And so a lot of things, like anything else in life, there's certainly ups and downs, and peaks and valleys. But it's been a wonderful career. I've been very blessed to have the career I've had and work with the people that I have, and that's probably the biggest gift. And it's even, it's to work with the high profile and the stars is one thing, but it's the rewards of and the people that I've gotten to know kind of behind the scenes and stuff too over the years. I've made wonderful friendships and relationships, and it's been great, truly blessed. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I thank you very much for coming. It's really wonderful, and appreciate you coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, maybe there's a book in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.